Our next speaker is Matthew. He'll talk for 5 minutes.
I'm Matt from Cornell, and I'm going to talk about controlling running in a video game called QWOP, which I think probably some of you know about. The game is essentially a running simulator which hit the internet in 2008 and kind of got famous for being very hard. The goal is to run 100 meters, and you can see one of my old lab mates is not running 100 meters. So I encourage you to Google it and try it yourselves. So I'm going to talk about what I've done with it and mention some broader things that I'm thinking about regarding it now. So QWOP, or QWOP, is named after the 4 keys on the keyboard that you press to control it. Q and W does that scissor motion to the hips, and O and P does antagonistic motion to the shanks. So QWOP presents some hard challenges, including we're stuck with bang-bang control. Keys either down or it's not. At 25 hertz, that's the rate the game updates. And the controls are very slow. It takes about a second for the leg to swing all the way through. We're very under-actuated, and there are also some hidden state variables inside of the physics engine, which creates a history dependence in there too. So I'm going to talk a little bit about first finding successful running trajectories, and then talk about trying to close the loop and make a full controller for it. So here's some things I'm thinking about that I don't necessarily have answers for now. But how do we use messy trajectories for control? So like, what kind of trajectories do we want? How close to optimal do they have to be? How many do we need? And then how do we fuse those together into something that's a controller? So for finding the trajectories, there are a lot of ways we could parameterize an action in the game, but I chose to do it where it's keys and how long do you hold it down for in time steps of the physics engine. For example, hold W and O for 5 time steps. We can string a bunch of these actions together to make a sequence. So that would represent a game if we went on forever. And then we could imagine that since everything in the game is discrete, one way we could reason about it is to put all the sequences into some giant tree that goes off to infinity. Much like trees used for playing games like chess and Go, these trees can get massive and are too big to search within the life of the universe. However, if we're willing to sacrifice some optimality, we can make some progress. We can estimate tree node values as we go, in my case using an approach called upper confidence bound for trees, which has had much success with the game Go. I'm not aware of anyone using it for physics-based stuff. But so this is a video of the tree being built out that way, and then here's the resulting trajectory that's represented way down there. So one of the questions I'm thinking about regarding that is, a nice feature of that approach is that there's a tunable knob for exploration versus exploitation. So I can generate a ton of trajectories very fast, or I could do a better one slower. And is it better for me to have quality or quantity? Another thing I've run up against is, for a while I was just generating similar good trajectories, and that wasn't very helpful. Because the essence of control is really in the recoveries. If you're watching a person perfectly balanced, it doesn't tell you much about what they're doing to control themselves, because they're not doing very much at all. So here I explicitly generate recoveries from deviation. So it does some steady running, then it does some deviation, then find out how to get back to it from there. So if we look at that not in tree form, but in runner form, you can see here are a bunch of states that I want to recover from. Here are the ones I was able to recover from. And here's the horde of runners who go off, who manage to recover. But you can still see that there's not a huge space, black blob of runners that could actually recover. So you're kind of limited in what you can get away with. So what can we do with these recoveries? I've been working on a number of things, including supervised learning. But the best results have actually come from a trajectory library approach. And that's what you're seeing here. So the yellow runner is the real one. And the blue ones represent trajectories that are being referenced from that library. The runner still messes up sometimes. You can see there's some faults in his running, and he still sometimes falls down. But he can usually figure out a recovery. So I think a lot of that can be improved by answering some of those questions I'm thinking about what trajectories do I choose, how do I prune down the ones I've got, and things like that. One of the things I'm thinking about for the not so distant future is model reduction. So here's a runner following some trajectory, and here are ones that the state has been compressed and then brought back up from 72 numbers down to 1, back up to 72 or 2, 4, 6, whatever. These are done with neural networks. This one's done with PCA. I think that since fundamentally not very much of the state space is actually explored in normal running, I think it must be a lower dimensional thing in the end. So that's one of the things I want to think about next, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts.
We have time for a couple questions.
So since you referenced Go, and specifically thinking about what DeepMind is doing, what were you doing for the rollout? Were you actually using a policy, or were you just randomly trying to find?
Yeah, the rollout policy, yeah, you know this stuff. The rollout policy was not quite random, but it was sampled from a distribution around actions that I know to be more promising than strictly random.
Okay. And were you outputting action probabilities, or just going through the tree and finding actions and then evaluating the best?
Sorry, could you say it one more time?
So you were outputting action probabilities, or just outputting actions?
Oh, outputting actions with a
evaluating trajectory
probability
values?
of a certain amount, yep. That's another tunable parameter. I can decide how much do I want it to, focus on things that it knows to be good versus try new things.
Next.
There are lots of interesting scientific questions I could ask, but I think we'd also like to know how far it can run and whether or not you are now the world record holder at QWOP.
Well, I think that one that I showed there is a little over 100 meters back there. So it can, it's not perfect. I did a calculation this morning of how far have I run in total playing the game. And I added up like a bunch of things. I came up with, I played about 300 million games so far of average length, like 14 seconds or so. Anyway, I calculated it out to be about 10 times to the moon.
And
which is more than 500 miles. So
is it the best? Like, are you the best now? Or are there people that beat you?
I don't think anyone would try to contest me if... That's the thing when you compete for something and no one else is trying.
Can I clarify something?
Please.
He's playing a fake game. So he's playing against his simulation of the game.
Yeah, I forgot to
so
mention
he hasn't played.
It's just a correct simulation.
It's a correct simulation without the randomness of the real game. So
Yeah.
it's a deterministic version of the real game.
So
he
I
hasn't
do-
played against the computer, against the internet yet.
Yeah, so it does need to go back to the internet. So in that sense, I have not won yet.
Okay.
But it's a matter of time, so.
Okay, thanks a lot, Matt.